Hi everyone, welcome back. We left off talking about Descartes. We were talking about his biography, and what remains of this lecture, I want to talk about his thought. Before I do that, I want to really quickly issue a correction from the lecture. During the lecture, I said that this gentleman here was from Holland. I said he was Dutch, when he is in fact Danish. Now, turning back to Descartes, Descartes was a philosopher who saw the world in crisis. He sort of, so to speak, was one of the earliest figures to see the writing on the wall. He saw that the old medieval view of the universe was crumbling around him, and he said that the modern worldview needed new answers to some of the most basic questions. We didn't have answers to the questions like, why do things fall? What is the universe really like? And what is the point of us? He attempted to do so, on the one hand, by drawing from some of the early astronomers like Galileo. Philosophy is written in this grand book, The Universe, which stands continually open to our gaze. It is written in the language of mathematics. Now, this was an idea that was popular among the early astronomers, but Descartes was one of the first philosophers to try to put this idea on a firm setting with a rational justification for the claim that nature is only truly understood when it's understood mathematically. He also provided a new answer to the question, what is the point of us? And his answer essentially was, the point of us is to become masters over nature. You're supposed to use science for the betterment of humankind. Famously, Descartes' method for achieving this type of certainty in science that would allow us to attain the progress that he dreamed of was to use doubt in order to arrive at certainty. Now, this is a paradoxical notion. Students often find it confusing. How is it that you could use doubt to achieve certain knowledge? And it's very complicated, and I'm happy to talk to anybody about it who wants to go further into the details. Those of you studying philosophy will encounter the argument in great detail in your second year. Here I'll just say that Descartes' basic strategy was criticize everything, subject everything that you possibly believe to the most thoroughgoing skepticism you possibly can, and anything that remains certain after you've attacked it with the most intense skepticism, that will count as genuine knowledge, and you can build up on that foundation. Here's his own description of his strategy in the Discourse on Method. Since my present aim was to give myself up to the pursuit of truth alone, I thought I must reject as absolutely false anything as to which I could imagine the least doubt, in order to see if I should not be left at the end believing something that was absolutely indubitable. Indubitable means beyond doubt. And so his idea is, if I subject all of my beliefs to the most intensive skepticism possible, something that comes out on the other side of that skepticism must be true. So that's the basic strategy, and I want you to be familiar with at least the following three outcomes of that strategy. The first is that he uses skepticism to destroy all common sources of knowledge. He says we cannot trust our senses, and he gives skeptical arguments as to why we can't. He says we cannot trust mathematics, not initially, not until they've been justified in the right sort of way. And he says we cannot trust logic until it's been justified. So he uses skepticism to destroy essentially everything that we claim to know. And at the end of this process, though, he says there's one thing I can't doubt, and that is the famous claim, I think I am. The basic idea is this. If you're thinking, even if you're systematically deceived in everything that you think is wrong, you cannot be mistaken about the fact that you are thinking. So it's a tricky argument. I encourage you to think about it and to raise the issue in seminar if you want to discuss it further. I think it's worthy of discussion. The second thing that I'd like you to familiarize yourself with is Descartes' four-step method. Because we are going to focus on this in the seminar this week, I decided not to go through it in the lecture. Just be aware that Descartes developed a four-step method, one that was extremely influential in the history of the scientific method, and it's something that we'll look at together in seminar. Finally comes Descartes' justification for the claim that the essence of the material world is best understood through mathematics. Descartes, to justify this argument, gives the famous example of the wax. The argument goes something like this. We think that we know the world through our senses. Take a piece of wax. You pick it up in your hand, you feel that it has a certain kind of feel to it, a certain kind of weight, a certain kind of heft, a certain kind of density. It resists you if you push into it, but not as much as something harder like concrete would. And it has a particular shape. And these are things that we think we know about the object. We think that it reveals some kind of fundamental information about it. But Descartes says, no, none of these things reveal anything that could properly be considered knowledge. Just look what happens when you melt the wax. It's still the same wax, but all of its sensuous properties, almost all of its sensuous properties, have changed. But, Descartes says, we can know the true essence of this substance, but not through the senses, through reason alone. For example, we can discover the object's mass by multiplying its density by its volume, and we can manipulate this formula so that we can calculate its volume or its density according to our needs. And Descartes' basic point here is that if you really want to discover what's true and objective about the material world, you need to grasp those objects mathematically. Because only when you grasp something in mathematical terms do you understand its objective being. So all the sensuous properties, that's just how the world appears to you. But if you can reduce those sensuous properties to some kind of measurement, then you're really talking objective. And this is probably the most influential idea that Descartes gave modern science. So he made a major contribution to scientific method, but he also gave a really influential justification for what we now take to be a basic fact about science. If you walk around a mathematics department at a university anywhere in the world, you often see these posters that say, mathematics is the language of science. And this is why. Mathematics is the language of science, because mathematics is something that allows us to talk about the natural world in a way that's truly universal or objective. So to sum up, we saw the story of the scientific revolution, and we saw that that revolution destroyed the Aristotelian worldview, a worldview that had been around since about 350 BC, so that was 1900 years roughly. And then with Bacon, we saw that among his many important contributions to the history of thought, he gave us an interesting theory of error in his account of the four idols, and a new theory of induction that was very influential in the development of scientific method. And finally, we looked at some of Descartes' contributions to the new science, using doubt to achieve certainty, developing an analytic method, which we'll talk about in more detail during seminar, and offering an argument that reality is only truly known when it's grasped mathematically.